He slapped the orange unsafe sticker on my barn and smiled like it was a game. Right behind him, my brother Martin winked, like destroying my livelihood was a joke. But that wasn't the worst part. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with a photo. A rotted field of soybeans. Dead from my fertilizer. Except I'd never shipped a single bag. Martin had been using our family name to push fake product, and framing me for it. My 5-year-old nephew is the one who found the crates and begged me to look. What Martin didn't know? I've saved every receipt, every signature, every timestamp for 30 years, and now I'm going to use his own paper trail to bury him. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I'm 45 years old. Every morning, I walk these same acres my father worked, checking fences and ledgers with equal care. The wet hay and diesel scent greets me at dawn, along with my 5-year-old nephew Samuel, who trails me like a curious shadow between the corn rows. My younger brother Martin drifts in and out of our lives, always pushing some new shortcut or scheme, while I keep our books clean, just like our father taught me. I've preserved every receipt, dated photo, and purchase order down to the penny, a habit that earns eye rolls from Martin but keeps us honest. These days, the margins grow thin while rumors grow thick, fed by my brother's golden opportunities. I cinch my boots tighter as night falls, watching our barn lamp sway. But let me start from the beginning. After supper, I was settling into my father's old armchair with the farm ledger when Samuel's small hand tugged at my sleeve. His eyes were wide, serious in a way that made my chest tighten. "Uncle Danny," he whispered, glancing toward the kitchen where his toys lay scattered. "You need to see the barn." Now, I've learned to pay attention when kids get that look. The one that says they've stumbled onto something grown-ups need to know. You ever notice how children can sense trouble before we do? "What's in the barn, buddy?" I kept my voice easy, but Samuel just shook his head and pulled harder at my sleeve. The evening wind rattled the screen door as we stepped outside. Gravel crunched under our boots, his little ones and my worn work pairs, while overhead, clouds scudded across a restless sky. The barn loomed ahead, its familiar silhouette somehow different in the growing dark. Samuel's grip on my hand tightened. The old door groaned open, same as it had thousands of times before. But tonight, something was off. You know that feeling when a room you've known all your life suddenly feels wrong? The hay dust hung in the air like always, but underneath was something else. A sharp, chemical smell that had no business being there. "Show me," I said softly to Samuel, lifting the lantern. Its light caught the dust motes swirling around us, making them dance like guilty spirits. Samuel pointed toward the back, where we stacked our fertilizer shipments. I remembered the sweet scent of fresh hay from summer afternoons spent here with Dad, teaching me how to stack bales just so. The memory made what I found next hit even harder. There were crates, dozens of them, stacked neat and high against the back wall. Nothing unusual there, except we hadn't ordered any shipments this month. My hands weren't quite steady as I pried open the nearest crate. The fertilizer bags inside bore our family brand, Mercer and Sons, the logo I'd watched my father design at our kitchen table 30 years ago. But something wasn't right. The stitching was off, just slightly, and the ink. I ran my finger over the curved M of Mercer. The texture was wrong. All wrong. Samuel hung back by a support post, half hidden in its shadow. Smart kid. He knew something was off too. I lifted one of the bags, and instead of the familiar soft slide of granules, I heard a harsh rattle. The weight was wrong too, lighter than it should have been. My stomach rolled as I surveyed the pallets. We had maybe 20 legitimate orders pending, but there were easily 3 times that many bags here. The shipping slips caught my eye then, rubber banded to a nail on one of the support beams. My hands shook as I pulled them free and stuffed them into my jacket pocket. The sour taste of bile crept up my throat. Someone was using our name, our reputation, to move counterfeit product. And given the setup, they had barn access and knew our operation inside out. "Samuel," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to go, back inside now." He nodded, solemn as a church deacon. I sure didn't want any more footprints around these crates than necessary. Not until I knew what we were dealing with. I killed the lantern and reached for his small hand in the darkness. At the door, I knelt down to his level. The moonlight caught his worried face. "Hey," I said softly. "Tomorrow morning, we'll figure this out. I promise." I squeezed his shoulder. "Sometimes answers hurt, but that doesn't mean we don't need them. You did right showing me this." Walking back to the house, the barn seemed to loom behind us like a shadow. Someone had brought theft into our barn and dressed it in our family's face. The shipping slips felt heavy in my pocket, like stones waiting to sink someone's plans. Morning came too slow. I'd barely slept, those shipping slips burning a hole in my desk drawer all night. You know how your mind spins when something's deeply wrong. By sunrise, I was already on my third cup of coffee, staring at the phone like it might bite. The cooperative's number was right there on the slips. Simple enough to dial, but my fingers felt stiff as old rope. 7:30 struck on the kitchen clock, early enough for office staff, late enough to be decent, and I punched in the numbers. Mid-State Agricultural Cooperative. This is Jeff speaking. Morning. Daniel. Mercer here. From Mercer & Sons. My voice stayed steady, though my free hand had balled into a fist. Got some questions about recent shipments. There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. Mr. Mercer, been meaning to reach out to you, actually. We've had situations. Situations? Started about a month back. Complaints trickling in about bad batches. All carrying your stamp. Each word hit like a shovel to the ribs. Jeff didn't sugarcoat it. Row after row of browning crops, withered tomato plants, corn stalks going yellow weeks too early. All traced back to bags bearing our name, our reputation. Remember that smell when Dad would open a fresh bag of fertilizer? Sweet and earthy, like promise itself? Well, these reports stank of betrayal. I spread the kitchen table with our official invoices while Jeff talked, placed the barn slips alongside them, and the picture got real clear, real fast. Different routes, different drivers, same damn logo. Scale, leverage, easy margins. Martin's voice echoed in my head. All those smooth pitches over family dinners. Now I knew what he'd meant. Our good name had greased his wheels, let him slide bad product right under everyone's noses. I'll need those complaint details, I said, already reaching for a pen. After hanging up, I grabbed my camera and truck keys. Had to see it firsthand. You ever notice how bad news feels more real when it's right in front of you? First stop was Tom Weber's place. Known him 20 years, shared equipment, helped each other through droughts. Today, he could barely meet my eyes as we walked his tomato fields. Started with spots, he said, jaw tight as he picked up a withered plant. Then the whole row just gave up. He handed me one of the fertilizer bags, our logo bold as brass on the side. I clicked photos of the lot codes, trying to keep my hands steady while my heart hammered. Tom's face said plenty without words. He was holding back anger out of respect for our history. That almost made it worse. Next was Carl Mitchell's corn. Same story. Different crop. He stood like a statue at the edge of his field, pointing at yellowed stalks that should have been deep green. Your brother assured me it was your best blend, Carl said, quietly. The accusation hung there, wrapped in 3 generations of neighbor trust. I photographed his return sacks too, noting dates and codes, evidence, proof that someone, Martin, had turned our family name into poison. The drive home felt longer than usual. Funny how betrayal can make familiar roads feel strange. Each withered field I passed could be another victim, another crack in a reputation my father had built by hand. The afternoon sun beat down as I parked by the house. Martin's truck was gone, probably off expanding opportunities somewhere. Good. After sundown, I'd get into the office files, see how deep this rot went. I sat at the kitchen table, spreading out the photos like playing cards in a losing hand. My coffee had gone cold, bitter as the truth it washed down. Every brown leaf and wilted stalk in those pictures was a signature on our family's shame. Night settled in, like a heavy blanket, the kind that smothers more than it comforts. I waited until Samuel's bedtime stories were done, and his breathing had gone soft and steady down the hall. No sign of Martin's truck yet. Typical. He'd been networking more than farming these days. You know that feeling when you're about to turn over a rock, knowing there's something ugly underneath? That's how my hand felt on the office door handle. The key to the filing cabinet was right where it always was, hanging on a nail behind Dad's old desk calendar. Some habits you keep even when the people who taught them are gone. The metal was cool against my palm as I turned it in the lock. Remember when filing cabinets were just full of seed orders and equipment warranties? Simple things that smelled like paper and honest work? Those days felt far away as I pulled out a thick manila folder I'd never seen before. The desk lamp cast a yellow circle on the documents inside. Loan addenda. Cross-collateralization riders. Legal terms that made my mouth go dry. And there, at the bottom of each one, was my signature. Except I'd never signed a damn thing. Hereby secures all current and future obligations against primary deed holders' interest. The words swam on the page as my stomach clenched. Martin hadn't just forged my name. He'd woven a web of debt through the farm's foundation. Every opportunity he'd chased, every scheme he'd launched, was now tied to our land like poison vines around a tree trunk. My chair screeched against the floorboards as I stood up too fast, papers trembling in my hands. That's when I heard it. Tires on gravel, headlights sweeping across the porch like searchlight beams. The knock came before I could even think about hiding the evidence. 3 sharp raps that meant business, not neighborly chat. "Evening, Daniel." Harold Webb from First State Bank stood in my doorway, his tie still perfect despite the late hour. I'd known him 20 years, seen him at church picnics and county fairs. Tonight, his face wore the careful blank look that bankers save for bad news. "Harold." My voice sounded strange in my ears, kind of late for a social call. He stepped in, briefcase first. "Wish it was social." He set a thick envelope on the desk, right on top of the papers I'd been reading. "There's been some irregularities, covenant breaches, payment arrears." I didn't need to open the envelope. The red stamp showing through the paper said enough. "Foreclosure notice." "These writers," Harold continued, tapping the documents I'd found. "They're all properly notarized. They tie everything together." He pulled out a calendar, circled a date in red ink that burned into my vision. "State law gives you 30 days before auction. 30 days. The words fell like stones into still water, ripples spreading through every plan and promise I'd ever made. "Harold, there has to be." "I'm sorry, Daniel. Truly." He placed his business card on top of the notice, though we both knew I had his number by heart. "Call if you find a way to clear it." But the pitying look in his eyes said the rest. The screen door's snap echoed like a gunshot as he left. I gripped the desk edge, feeling the smooth wear where Dad's hands had rested for 30 years before mine. Down the hall, Samuel's soft breathing carried through the quiet house. 1, 2, 3, 4. I counted breaths like Dad taught me to count fence posts when work seemed overwhelming. The office clock ticked, each sound like a hammer driving nails into the farm's coffin. 30 days. The calendar's red circle pulsed in the lamplight. Come morning, I'd find Martin. Before the deadline could swallow everything our parents had built, before it could steal Samuel's inheritance, I'd face my brother and hear him try to explain this betrayal to my face. The night stretched ahead, full of papers to read and bitter truths to swallow. But right now, all I could do was stand there, listening to that clock tick while our family legacy hung by a thread I hadn't even known was fraying. The morning dew hadn't burned off yet when I spotted Martin loading his truck. He was whistling, actually whistling, while he checked his side mirrors, like nothing in the world could touch him. You ever notice how the worst conversations of your life always start on beautiful days? The sun was painting everything gold, making the whole world look honest. "Morning, brother." I kept my voice steady as I walked up, clutching the evidence folder. "Got something we need to discuss." He turned, flashing that sales smile that had fooled better men than me. "Make it quick. Got deliveries lined up." "Yeah, about those deliveries." I pulled out the counterfeit bags from the barn, laying them on the truck bed one by one. Next came the complaint records. Then those forged writers with my signature dancing across the bottom. "Want to explain this?" Martin glanced at the papers like they were yesterday's news. "Always so dramatic, Danny. This is business. Scaling up, moving product. You're stuck in Dad's small-time thinking." "Small-time thinking?" My fingers curled into fists. "You're selling garbage with our name on it. People's crops are dying." He laughed, actually laughed, and leaned against the truck. "Prove it." "You can't prove ink, brother. Papers get signed all the time. Things get mixed up in shipping." He shrugged. "Who's going to believe the guy who can't keep up with modern farming anyway?" "Samuel believes in this farm." The name hit him like a slap. I saw his smile crack for just a second. "He deserves better than watching you poison everything our parents built." But that crack sealed right up, and his smile came back sharper. "Speaking of poison, heard the Wilsons lost their whole bean crop. Everyone's talking about how the Mercer brand isn't what it used to be." The rest of that day felt like walking through quicksand. At Miller's feed store, Tom barely looked at me when I came in. His morning had all the warmth of January frost. I'd known Tom 30 years, shared Christmas dinners at his table, and now he couldn't meet my eyes. Walking down Main Street, I saw Betty Anderson spot me coming. She crossed to the other side, suddenly fascinated by the hardware store window. Her husband Jeff had borrowed our tractor last spring when his broke down. Now I was something to avoid. My phone buzzed around noon. A text from Ray Peterson popped up. Just a photo, no words needed. His soybean field stretched out brown and dead, our family's logo clear on the empty bags stacked by the fence. 20 years of buying from us ended with one picture. Back home, I spread everything across the kitchen table. 29 days left, and the sales ledger showed numbers dropping faster than autumn leaves. Last week's orders had more cancellations than confirmations. Next week's column was empty enough to echo. You know what Dad used to say about emotion? Feelings fill bellies about as well as fog fills barns. He was right. Martin knew it too. That's why he had paper, contracts, signatures, documentation, the weapons of modern warfare. I lined up my evidence like Dad taught me to. Line up fence posts, straight, measured, each piece supporting the next. The counterfeit bags, the shipping records, the customer complaints, the forged documents, all solid, all real, but scattered like buckshot instead of aimed like a rifle. Somewhere around midnight I was still at that table, scribbling questions in margins, arranging facts like puzzle pieces. The house creaked around me, and every sound seemed to whisper that I couldn't fight this alone. Not anymore. Pride's a funny thing on a farm. It keeps you going through drought years and market crashes, but it can also blind you worse than any dust storm. Sitting there in the dark, I finally admitted what I should have known days ago. Sometimes asking for help isn't weakness. It's the only way to keep standing. I wrote my questions again, cleaner this time. Organized the documents by date. Made notes about who to call first. Thing tomorrow. The kitchen clock ticked away another hour of my 29 days, but at least now I had a direction to walk in. Whether it led anywhere worth going, well, that was tomorrow's problem. The next morning, my coffee had barely cooled when I heard tires on gravel. Through the kitchen window, I watched Hank Delaney's old Ford roll to a stop. He stepped out carrying a steel thermos, moving with that unhurried confidence of someone who'd weathered storms and come out standing. Remember those autumn days when Hank's combine would break down, and he'd just pull up a crate, study the engine like it was telling him a story? That same steady look was on his face now as he climbed my porch steps. Morning, Daniel. He held up the thermos. Thought we might need reinforcements. I let him in, and the familiar scent of his coffee, strong enough to walk on its own, filled the kitchen. We'd shared hundreds of cups over property lines and weather reports, but this one tasted different. This one meant business. For the next hour, I laid it all out. The counterfeit bags in the barn, Samuel's discovery, Martin's scheme with the forged documents, the foreclosure notice burning a hole in my desk drawer, the customers turning their backs. Hank just listened, those sharp eyes taking in every detail, while his coffee went cold. When I finished, he didn't offer sympathy or outrage. Instead, he said, "Show me your ledger." I spread everything across the table, shipping slips, complaint photos, purchase orders, bank notices. Hank studied each piece like he was assembling a puzzle in his mind. The morning light crept across the kitchen floor as he made neat stacks, checking dates and numbers. "Here's what we need," he finally said, pulling out a notebook. "First, we track every legitimate shipment against these counterfeits. Chain of custody, who touched what, when, and where it went. Then we build a timeline of the bad lots, matched against your real inventory." The way he laid it out, clear as fence wire, made my shoulders straighten. This wasn't just anger anymore. This was a plan. "County courthouse will have bills of lading," he continued, sketching a quick diagram. "We'll need co-op manifests too. They're receiving records against your shipping logs. Every number that doesn't match is another nail. You ever watch a barn raising? How the frame starts to take shape, and suddenly you can see the whole building in your mind? That's how it felt, sitting there with Hank plotting our counterattack. Each document was a beam, each record a support post. "I know what Martin's counting on," Hank said, tapping his pen on the table. "He thinks chaos will hide his tracks. But paper doesn't lie if you know how to read it." I couldn't help but smile, remembering how this retired attorney used to keep his farm books so precise, you could audit them blindfolded. Like Dad always said, numbers tell the truth even when people don't. Exactly. Hank handed me a fresh notepad labeled Truth Trail in his neat handwriting. "You hit the courthouse. I'll call Pete at the co-op. He owes me from that grain elevator dispute last year. We need every shipping record they've got." The clock on my wall seemed to tick a little slower now. 27 days left, but for the first time since this started, I felt solid ground under my feet. I fueled up the pickup while Hank made his calls. The morning had warmed enough to need just a light jacket, and the air smelled like turned earth and possibility. Funny how having someone in your corner can change the whole landscape. By sunset, I had a stack of photocopies thick enough to choke a filing cabinet. Court records, shipping manifests, inventory reports, each one another piece of armor against Martin's lies. The dusk pressed against my kitchen windows as I organized them into Hank's system, every document tagged and cross-referenced. The next morning, Hank met me at the county archives building before they even unlocked the doors. Ever notice how government buildings all have that same smell? Like old paper and floor wax mixed with coffee that's been sitting too long. "Carrier logs first," Hank said, leading us through the maze of filing cabinets like he'd built them himself. "Every legitimate shipment leaves a paper trail. Martin's counterfeits will show gaps." We claimed a back table and started diving in. My eyes burned from scanning page after page of tiny print, but Hank had taught me what to look for. Roots that didn't match up, signatures that appeared in too many places, timestamps that defied physics. "Look at this," I said, sliding a log sheet across the table. "Driver claims he delivered to Thompson's place at 2:15, then somehow made it clear across the county to Weber's by 2:45. That's an hour-long drive, minimum." Hank's eyes narrowed as he compared it against our timeline. "And here, same driver supposedly, unloading at the co-op warehouse while making those deliveries. Unless he's got a twin brother. You know that feeling when you're tracking a fox that's been raiding your henhouse, and you finally start seeing clear prints in the mud? That's how it felt as we pieced it together. Martin had gotten sloppy with his paperwork, probably figuring nobody would ever look this close. Your family brand shows up on these delivery receipts," Hank pointed out. "But the route never touches your warehouse. How's that possible unless the bags are coming from somewhere else entirely?" I finished, my jaw tightening. The image of those counterfeit sacks in my barn flashed through my mind. We broke for lunch around noon, but only because Hank insisted. "Can't think straight on an empty stomach," he said, though I noticed he used the break to make some calls on his cell phone. Back at it, we found more holes in Martin's scheme. Ghost deliveries, impossible schedules, inventory numbers that danced around like corn in a windstorm. Hank marked each discrepancy with a yellow highlighter, building our case one stroke at a time. I called Pete at the co-op while Hank dug through another file box. "Need you to verify some delivery times for me," I said, reading off dates. Pete's voice got real interested when he checked his records. "That's odd, Daniel. According to our receiving log, those shipments came in 3 hours before your invoice times, and they're marked as pre-cleared. Bypassed our normal quality check." The photocopier hummed and clerk stamps thumped as we duplicated everything we'd found. My hands were gray with paper dust and yellow with highlighter smears, but each copy felt like another sandbag in the wall we were building against Martin's flood. 24 days left. The clock kept ticking, but its sound didn't shake me quite as bad now. We had something solid. Not enough yet, but growing. Back home that evening, I locked our copies in Dad's old seed money strongbox, a dented tin box that had survived 3 barn fires and 2 floods. The metal felt cool and solid under my fingers, just like the evidence inside. I was just finishing up some notes at the kitchen table when headlights swept across my window. The porch light caught the white paint of an official-looking truck as it nosed up my drive. My stomach tightened, but I kept my breathing steady. Through the screen door, I heard boots on gravel, taking their sweet time coming up the path. Each step sounded deliberate, like they were counting out a fine. You want to know the funny thing about fear? After enough hits, it starts feeling more like fuel. I stood up, squared my shoulders, and watched the shadow climb my porch steps. The screen door hinges creaked. They always did this time of year, as knuckles rapped against the frame. The screen door opened to reveal a thin man in a crisp white uniform, clipboard tucked under one arm. "Mr. Mercer, Tom Whitaker, State Agricultural Safety Board." He extended a hand that felt too soft for someone who claimed to know farming. "Need to conduct an immediate facility inspection." "At this hour?" I glanced at my watch. Nearly 8. "Regulations allow for unscheduled reviews when concerns are raised." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure you understand." Before I could argue, another vehicle crunched up the drive. Martin's SUV. Of course. My brother stepped out looking like he'd just won the lottery, and that's when I knew this inspection was about as genuine as his fertilizer bags. "Evening, Tom," Martin called out, way too friendly. "Thanks for making the time on short notice." I watched them shake hands like old friends while my gut churned. This whole thing stank worse than last summer's compost pile. "Shall we start with the warehouse?" Whitaker suggested, already heading that direction. Martin fell in step beside him, and I trailed behind, watching their shoulders bump companionably as they walked. The warehouse lights hummed to life, revealing neat rows of our legitimate product. Everything was exactly as it should be. Clean floors, organized pallets, proper ventilation. But Whitaker's frown deepened with each step. "These bags here," he said, pointing to a perfectly normal stack of feed. "Section 47.3 requires a minimum 3-foot clearance from support beams. This is..." He made a show of measuring with his hand. Approximately 34 inches. Want to know what rehearsed sounds like? Listen to someone quote regulations they just memorized that morning. And here, he continued, scribbling furiously. Section 52.1 clearly states all chemical storage must maintain consistent humidity levels below 60%. Your gauge shows 58, dangerously close to violation threshold. I caught Martin trying to hide his smirk. My hands curled into fists, but I forced them loose. Getting angry wouldn't help. The inspection dragged on for another hour, each note more ridiculous than the last. Then came the moment that turned my stomach. Whitaker pulled a card from his pocket. Martin palmed something that looked suspiciously green, and they shared a wink that confirmed everything. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer," Whitaker said, not sounding sorry at all. "But given these numerous violations, I have no choice but to issue an immediate suspension of operations." He slapped a bright orange notice on the warehouse door. The words hit like buckshot. "Unsafe. Sales frozen pending review." Martin clapped my shoulder as he passed. "Tough break, brother. But safety first, right?" I read that notice twice more after they left, hoping the words might change. They didn't. My phone started buzzing. Text after text from customers canceling orders. 17 days left on the bank's deadline, and now we couldn't sell so much as a handful of grain. The quiet in that warehouse pressed against my ears like deep water. I walked back to the house, each step heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Samuel's little green toy tractor sat next to the fridge where he'd left it that morning. Its tiny wheels pointed toward a future that suddenly felt real shaky. My hands shook as I dialed Hank's number. "God damn it," he muttered when I told him. Then, softer. "But listen, Daniel. Paper still beats theater. Every time. They're getting desperate. Playing tricks like this means we're closer than they want us to be." Maybe so, but watching Samuel's tractor catch the kitchen light, I felt my faith take a hard hit. That little toy represented everything I was fighting for. Not just the farm, but the legacy of honest work it was supposed to teach him. The wind picked up outside, rattling the barn doors I'd have to close before turning in. It carried a smell I recognized from years of farming. The sharp, clean scent of coming loss. Some storms you can't outrun, you just have to shelter in place and pray your foundations hold. "Time for bed, Samuel," I called upstairs, swallowing back words that had no business reaching 5-year-old ears. Some burdens weren't meant for small shoulders, no matter how much they might want to help carry them. I couldn't tell you when I finally fell asleep that night, but I was up before the roosters, watching frost smoke off the fence wire like the farm itself was bleeding out its last breath. My coffee sat untouched, gone cold like my hopes of keeping this place. You ever have one of those mornings where giving up feels like the smartest thing you could do? Where you look at all your options and realize maybe losing with dignity beats fighting till you're broken? Hank showed up right as the sun started painting the east pasture gold. He took one look at my face and settled into the kitchen chair without a word. "Maybe it's time to face facts," I said, my voice rough from a night of turning possibilities over and over. "I've got enough saved to get Samuel and me set up somewhere small. Apartment, maybe. Regular job." The words tasted like ash. At least the boy wouldn't have to watch his uncle go down in flames in front of the whole county. Remember that coffee shop downtown that closed last spring? How the owner kept the lights on right till the end, even though everyone knew it was done? I was starting to feel like that. A dead man walking, just too stubborn to lie down. Hank didn't jump in with encouragement. He just sat there, letting the quiet stretch between us like a test. The kitchen clock ticked away seconds we couldn't spare, and somewhere outside a tractor rumbled past on the county road. Someone else's day rolling forward while mine felt stuck in mud. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Your father's ledgers never blinked, Daniel. Not through drought, not through flood. Not even that year the bank tried calling his loan early." He tapped his fingers on the table. "You telling me you're ready to blink?" Before I could answer, small feet padded down the stairs. Samuel, still in his dinosaur pajamas, climbed straight into my lap like he used to do when he was younger. His weight settled against my chest, warm and trusting. "Uncle Danny?" His voice was small. "Is the farm gonna disappear?" Christ. That question hit harder than any bank notice. I looked down at his worried little face and felt something crack inside me. The farm wasn't just land and buildings. It was his future, his heritage, everything his grandparents had built, everything I'd protected, all wrapped up in one 5-year-old's hopes. I exhaled slow, feeling decades of Mercer's stubbornness rise up like spring water. "No, buddy. We're not done fighting yet." Hank's eyes crinkled at the corners, Without a word, he started pulling papers from his briefcase, and I set Samuel up with his coloring books before joining him on the floor. We spread everything out like we were planning a military campaign. Contracts here, riders there, bank notices forming their own sad little island. My knees cracked as I knelt down, making me feel every one of my 45 years. Start with the formatting, Hank advised. Legal documents are like crop rows. They line up perfect or something's wrong. So we did. Margins, fonts, seal placements. The work was mind-numbing, but I've spent enough years walking fence lines to know sometimes tedium pays off. About an hour in, Hank went, "Still. Hold up." He laid his pen on a clause in one of Martin's riders. "Look here. Therefore, instead of therefore. Could be a typo," I said, but my pulse picked up. Could be. He shuffled through papers. Except, here it is again. And here. His pen tracked across 3 separate documents, each one showing the same misspelling. Something electric hummed through the room. If these documents were supposed to be from different lawyers, different dates, why did they share the same mistake? "We need better light," I said, already pushing to my feet. And every single piece of paper Martin's touched in the last year. I set my phone alarm for dawn and arranged the papers in careful stacks. Tonight, I'd sleep right here on the floor beside them, like a dog guarding sheep. For the first time in days, that knot in my chest loosened just a fraction. Maybe Hank was right. Maybe paper really could beat theater, if we just knew where to look. Morning hit like a shot of strong coffee. Hank and I had barely moved from our spots on the kitchen floor, surrounded by paper walls that had grown taller through the night. My back complained, but I couldn't have slept anyway. Not with what we were starting to see. "Here's another one," I said, circling a typo in red. "Principal" instead of principal on the third rider. My pen tapped the spot where Martin's fake documents kept stumbling over basic banking terms. Hank grunted, adding it to our growing list. "Same mistake on the April contract, too. Funny how different lawyers working months apart make identical errors, isn't it? You ever watch one of those crime shows where they lay pictures over each other to spot differences? That's what we did next. Holding contract pages up to the window light. The seals were meant to look official, but they sat crooked at the exact same angle every time. Dates jumped between American and European formats, then back again, like someone forgot which style they were copying. "Danny, look at this." Hank's voice had that quiet intensity that means something's about to break. He laid down Martin's signatures from 3 separate documents. "See how that loop in the M curves? Now watch." He stacked them on the light box we'd borrowed from the vet's office. The flourish wasn't just similar, it was identical, down to the pixel, like someone had traced the same signature over and over, forgetting that real signatures always show tiny variations. "Well, I'll be damned," I whispered, thinking of all those hours Martin spent in his office, probably laughing at how easy it was to print and sign and stamp his way into stealing my life's work. Hank sat back, running a hand through his gray hair. "You know what we're looking at, right? This isn't just sloppy paperwork. It's forgery, criminal fraud, the kind that makes banks nervous and prosecutors interested." The word fraud hung in the air like smoke. I remembered Dad's voice. A mercer's word is his bond. Guess Martin missed that lesson, along with basic spelling. I pulled out fresh paper and started writing, keeping it simple like Hank taught me. First, the fake fertilizer, shipments, with dates and lot numbers. Then, the forged riders linking those shipments to my deed. Finally, the evidence of forgery itself. Every repeated mistake, every misaligned seal, every identical signature laid out in cold, clear facts. "Make it something a banker can't ignore," Hank advised, watching me stack exhibits like I was stacking hay, neat, tight, and squared at the corners. The printer hummed, spitting out copies while I practiced, saying it out loud. "These documents show systematic fraud. No emotion, no family drama. Just the facts, lined up like fence posts pointing straight at Martin's scheme." I checked the calendar. 10 days left before the bank's deadline. Felt like standing in front of a storm, watching the clouds stack up black and mean. But this time, I had more than just worry in my hands. I had proof. The bank secretary sounded surprised when I called. "Mr. Mercer." "Yes, Mr. Harrison can see you first thing tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp." I loaded everything into Dad's old strongbox, the one with a dent from where it fell off the tractor that time. Seemed fitting somehow. The latch clicked shut with a sound like certainty. Out on the porch, Samuel was already up, watching me load the truck with his serious little man face. "You gonna fix it, Uncle Danny?" "That's the plan, buddy." I ruffled his hair, remembering how he'd led me to that barn in the first place. Smart kid. He knew something was wrong before any of us. He raised his hand in that solemn way kids have, like he was sending me off to battle. Maybe he was. The morning sun caught his face, and for a second, he looked so much like Dad it made my chest tight. The gravel crunched under my boots as I headed for the truck. Behind me, I could hear Samuel still waving, like he knew this morning was different, like he could feel the weather changing, same as I could. 8 o'clock at Harrison Bank, and my hands weren't even shaking. Funny how calm you get when you're carrying truth instead of fear. The lobby still had that same leather and polish smell it had back when Dad would bring me here on deposit days. I remember him teaching me to count twice, sign once, and always look the teller in the eye. Today, though, we headed straight past the tellers to the manager's office upstairs. Tom Harrison looked exactly like what you'd expect from a third-generation banker. Crisp shirt, steady eyes, and that careful neutral expression they must teach in finance school. He gestured to the conference table, all dark wood and morning sun. "Mr. Mercer, Mr. Delaney, what can I help you with today?" I laid out our evidence book while Hank settled in like he was back in court. You know those moments when you've rehearsed something so many times it feels like muscle memory? That's how the words came. "Mr. Harrison, we've uncovered systematic fraud in the documents supporting your foreclosure action." I opened to the first tab. "These are counterfeit fertilizer shipments wearing my brand. These are forged writers linking those shipments to my deed. And these," I spread out the contract pages with their matching typos. "These show how it was done." Harrison's expression shifted from banker polite to something sharper. He leaned forward, adjusting his reading glasses. "Show me the timeline again," he said, reaching for the shipping manifests. I walked him through it step by step, just like Hank and I had practiced. The fake shipments, the impossible delivery routes, the identical errors that kept showing up in supposedly separate contracts. "Notice how therefore is misspelled the same way in documents supposedly drafted months apart," Hank pointed out. "And these notary seals, they're misaligned at precisely the same angle." Harrison picked up his desk phone. "Linda, get me Jerry from legal. Now please." 10 minutes later, a speakerphone was sitting between us, and a lawyer's voice was asking very specific questions about chain of custody and document authentication. I could practically hear him taking notes. "Mr. Harrison," the lawyer said finally, "I recommend immediate suspension of foreclosure proceedings pending regulatory review. These allegations are credible and documented. We cannot enforce writers that show clear evidence of forgery." Harrison nodded slowly. "I agree." He looked at me directly. "Mr. Mercer, we'll prepare a formal suspension notice today. But you understand, this doesn't end here?" "No, sir," I said. "We're headed to the State Board next." "Good. We'll provide a letter acknowledging the suspension and our concerns about the documentation. You'll want that for your filing." Walking out those brass doors felt like stepping out of a weight vest. The air was heavy with coming rain, but for once, I didn't hear thunder behind it. Hank clapped my shoulder as we headed for his car. "First round's done," he said. "Now for the main event." The State Agricultural Board office was housed in one of those bland government buildings downtown. Inside, it smelled like paper and coffee that had been sitting too long. The clerk at the filing window looked bored until she started reading our complaint. "This is unusual," she said, flipping through the exhibit book. "Yes, ma'am," I agreed. "That's why we're here." She disappeared into the back with our documents. When she returned, she had a hearing notice in her hand. "Friday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Boardroom 3. She stamped our copies with the kind of efficiency that comes from doing something 10,000 times. "All parties will be notified. 3 days. The foreclosure clock might be paused, but my gut was still counting every hour. People were still crossing the street when they saw me coming. My brand still meant poison in other people's fields. But walking back to the car, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Solid ground under my feet. "You did good in there," Hank said as we pulled away from the curb. "Kept it clear and simple. Let the evidence do the talking." I nodded, watching the government building shrink in the side mirror. Friday morning suddenly felt both too close and too far away. The next morning, my kitchen table looked like a war room. You ever try to tell your life story through paper? It's harder than you'd think. Every exhibit needed a label. Every statement its own tab, all arranged to lead 5 strangers through a betrayal they hadn't lived. "Remember," Hank said, tapping a photo of the counterfeit bags, "start with what they can touch. Physical evidence speaks louder than accusations." I nodded, throat dry despite the coffee getting cold beside me. The smell of toast Samuel hadn't finished drifted from his plate. He'd been too excited about staying with his friend Tommy to eat properly. Maybe that was for the best. Some mornings aren't meant for children's eyes. "Walk me through the shipping manifests again," Hank prompted. We'd been at this since dawn, his reading glasses catching early light as he played devil's advocate. If they ask about the gap between delivery dates, I point them to Exhibit C, I finished, showing how the fake lots bypassed our regular warehouse completely. The hearing room at the State Board felt exactly like you'd expect. All dark paneling and filtered sunlight, with chairs that had witnessed decades of verdicts. The air carried that mix of paper dust and furniture polish that seems to live in every government building. At the check-in desk, the clerk's pen scratched my name into the official record. Permanent ink, permanent moment. My hands didn't shake as I signed, and I counted that as a victory. 5 board members filed in, faces neutral as judges. The center chair, a woman with steel-rimmed glasses, accepted our evidence binder like she was weighing more than paper. "We'll need the original documents," she announced, looking directly at me. "Your brother claims to hold them." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "That's part of our complaint. The originals he claims to have don't exist. These contracts were generated through forgery." Martin showed up 20 minutes late, all smooth apologies and designer suit. He slid his document folder across the table with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a hand. But under the fluorescent lights, even from where I sat, I could see it. The same pristine whiteness to every page. The same crisp corners. Papers that had supposedly been signed months apart looked like they'd come from the same printer yesterday. I caught Hank's slight nod. He saw it, too. The board chair held one contract up to the light, then another. Her frown deepened as she aligned the pages. "We'll take a brief recess," she announced, "to verify these seals and notary records with the county office." She gestured to the clerk, who gathered the documents with careful hands. I stood by the window while we waited, watching afternoon clouds build up over the city. Below, a woman with a press badge snapped photos of the hearing docket. Tomorrow's headlines were already taking shape, pixel by pixel. You ever notice how time moves different when you're waiting? Those 20 minutes felt longer than all 30 days had so far. I counted my breaths, watched dust motes dance in sunbeams, tried not to look at Martin lounging in his chair like this was all beneath him. The clerk finally returned, heels clicking on hardwood. She whispered something to the chair, who nodded once firmly. "Given the complexity of the evidence presented," the chair announced, "the board will deliver its findings tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. She looked at each of us in turn. "All parties are required to attend. 2 days left on the banker's calendar. And now one more night to wait." I gathered my notes while Martin brushed past, cologne and contempt trailing in his wake. Outside, dusk was painting the sky purple. I sat in my truck for a long minute, just breathing. Samuel would be waiting at Tommy's house, probably full of stories about their afternoon adventures. I couldn't let him hear the worry in my voice, couldn't let him see how tight I was gripping the wheel. I started the engine and headed toward Tommy's place, carrying silence like a shield. 9 a.m. felt like it took a year to arrive. I'd been up since 4, watching the kitchen clock crawl while coffee went cold in my cup. You know those moments when your whole life hangs on what someone else will say? Yeah, it was one of those mornings. Hank met me in the parking lot, thermos in hand. "Whatever happens," he said, gripping my shoulder, "we showed them the truth." The hearing room seemed smaller today, packed with faces I recognized from town. Word gets around fast in farming communities, especially when there's drama brewing. I caught whispers behind hands, saw phones ready to spread whatever news was coming. The board members filed in right on time, their faces giving nothing away. The chair adjusted her microphone with deliberate care while shuffling papers into perfect alignment. "After reviewing all submitted evidence," she began, her voice filling the hushed room, "this board finds substantial proof of document forgery in the loan riders and transfer agreements presented by Martin Mercer." My breath caught. Beside me, Hank's pen scratched rapid notes. "These riders are hereby ruled null and void," she continued, "and legally incapable of encumbering the deed to Mercer Family Farms." She looked directly at Martin. "Furthermore, evidence of counterfeit product distribution under a registered family brand will be referred to the appropriate authorities." The bank manager, who must have been waiting for this, stepped forward, immediately with papers in hand. "In light of the board's ruling, First State Bank hereby cancels all foreclosure proceedings and confirms Mercer Family Farms' good standing." You could have heard a seed drop in that room. Then Martin's chair scraped back, his face twisted like he'd bitten something sour. But before he could speak, the board's press officer was already posting the official decision on the bulletin board outside. Phones started buzzing almost instantly. I glimpsed the local news alert. "State Board exposes agricultural fraud scheme." Another ping. "Local farmer cleared, brother named in counterfeit product scam." A courthouse deputy, looking like he'd done this dance before, appeared at Martin's elbow. "Sir, let's use the side exit. For everyone's convenience." Camera flashes popped through the windows as they led Martin out. The whispers followed him like burrs, catching on wool. Con man, his own family. Can you believe? Hank drove us home. I couldn't trust my hands just yet. The fields rolled past my window, and maybe it was just relief playing tricks, but they looked different now. Patient. Like they'd known all along that truth would win out. We pulled up to the barn just as Samuel came racing across the yard from Tommy's house, his face split with a grin that could have lit up midnight. Uncle Daniel, did we win? Tommy's dad said the farm is safe." I lifted him up, getting harder to do these days, he's growing so fast, and pressed my forehead to his. "We sure did, buddy. Want to help me with something special?" From my truck's glove box, I pulled out the brass nameplate I'd ordered last week. Samuel traced the letters with one finger while I got my tools. The late morning sun caught every groove of the engraving as I positioned it on the barn's main door frame. Each screw I turned felt like setting a fence post. Permanent. Purposeful. The wind picked up just then, carrying that sweet hay smell that always reminded me of Dad. I could almost hear him. "A man's word is his bond, son. His name means something." I stepped back and knelt beside Samuel, both of us admiring how the brass gleamed against the old wood. "Can you read what it says?" He nodded solemnly. "Samuel's legacy. That's right." I squeezed his shoulder while Hank looked on with a smile. "Because sometimes, buddy, betrayal only fuels a stronger comeback."